In today's lesson, we will be learning how to create simple formulas and basic functions. Now, because you'll be doing this from home and you might not have access to Microsoft Excel, we're going to be doing today's lesson in Google Sheets. But the functionality is going to be very similar to what you could expect from Microsoft Excel. Where there are minor differences, like the menu options, I'll try and show you where those are at in Excel as well, just so that you know. Now, the one big thing that will be different today is how you're going to save this to your own Google Drive. So you've clicked on a link from Canvas that brings you to this spreadsheet. What we're going to do is copy that to your Google Drive so that you can edit it, because the edition that you got from Canvas is view only. So the first thing you're going to do is go up to File and then make a copy, and then I would recommend that you delete where it says copy of, and next to business math you're going to just add your name, at least first name, last initial, like that. That way you have your own copy that you're working in that you'll then submit to me when you're finished. So in this example today, we're going to look at formulas and functions. Formulas and functions are an essential tool to analyzing numbers quickly and efficiently. Now in this example, we have a department manager for a business, and they've received a budget for the new year and want to find out how much that budget has changed from last year. It would also be helpful if the spreadsheet could show them the change as a positive number if they have more budget in a category this year, and negative if they have less. So let's use a simple formula to create this analysis. Remember that a formula is a mathematical expression that calculates a value in a cell. So anytime we work with formulas, we're going to be dealing with some kind of a math equation, either add, subtract, multiply, or divide. Whenever we deal with formulas on my spreadsheet examples in this Google Sheet, they're going to be highlighted in gray. So anytime you see a cell in gray, that's a cell you're going to need to calculate some kind of a mathematical formula to answer the question. So let's start by taking a look at cell D6. Now remember, the manager wants us to show the change between last year and this year. So let's think about this. What kind of math would we use to show a change in a number? Would that be add, subtract, multiply, or divide? If you said subtract, you would be right. So anytime we have a formula-based question, the first thing we need to do is stop and think, all right, what kind of math are we going to use? So in this case, it's subtraction. So let's create a subtraction problem here. Now, I'm just going to type in my subtraction problem just like I would in a calculator, and let's see what happens. I'm going to put 92,500 minus 95,000 and press enter. And nothing happened. It didn't calculate. That's because Microsoft Excel recognizes two kinds of data input. It can either be a calculation or what's called a label. A label is just text. So in this case, this is a label. It's not recognizing these as numbers. It's recognizing them as characters. So it sees 92500-95000. It doesn't see numbers, it just sees the text. If we wanted to calculate, we have to ask Excel to calculate politely. The way that you ask Excel to calculate something is using the equal sign. So I'm going to come back up and edit this formula to use the equal sign. Now there's two ways to edit formulas in Excel or Google Sheets. What you could do is double click on the cell, and if you did that, that takes us back to text edit mode where we could edit something inside of that cell. The other thing we can do is use what's called a formula bar. The formula bar is up at the very top, kind of like an address bar in Google, and that is where all of your formula information is located. So you can see my formula up here on the formula bar. If I click in there, I can edit it there as well. So I'm going to go in there and add an equal sign, and then it's going to recognize that I'm trying to calculate something. And when I hit enter now, you'll see the calculation. So if I were to click on that cell again, D6, down here in the cell itself you see the answer, but up on the formula bar you see the formula still, and that's why we call it a formula bar. So when you're checking your formulas, you'll always be able to see them up at the top when all you see is the answer down in the cells. Now in Microsoft Excel, that formula bar is also up at the top in a very similar location. Let me show you what that looks like. So here's Microsoft Excel. And the formula bar is up here at the top below the menu, similar to what it is in Google. It just looks a little different because Google doesn't have a ribbon menu like Excel does. But it still has the little FX for function symbol right there on the formula bar. So now that we have that formula in there, we want to make sure that it's showing correctly. Remember that the manager wants it to be positive if there's more money this year and negative if there's less. Now, it looks like there's less money in salaries for this year for that budget category. So this should be a negative number. Did it come out to be a negative number? Some of you may be thinking that it's not because it doesn't have the little dash in front of it. But that's because this is displayed in what's called an accounting format. In accounting format, negative numbers are always shown using parentheses on each side of them. So even though this doesn't look like what you're used to, this is a negative number because it has that parenthesis around it. So now we've created our formula, but it's not quite perfect yet. You see, let's imagine for a minute that the manager went back to his boss and requested more money for salaries. $92,500 just wasn't enough. And after talking with his manager, he got his manager to bring it up an extra $1,000. So I'm going to come in here and change the budget for this year from $92,000 to $93,500. Yeah, that looks better, but did our change formula change at all? It didn't. It's no longer right. If I wanted it to be correct, I'd have to go back to this formula as well and also change the number. That can be kind of a pain, especially if we forget all the different formulas that one cell is based off of. So for that reason, when we're working in Microsoft Excel, we never want to use what's called hard-coded numbers, meaning that the numbers are typed directly into the formula. What we want to do instead is type the numbers in the cell, like C6, and then reference that cell inside the formula using cell referencing. Now, we learned about cell referencing when we were working with the battleship assignment. So let's try using some of those cell references in this formula. So I'm actually going to go in and edit my formula again, and I'm going to delete where it says 92,500. And I'm going to change that with the cell for that number, which is C6. So I'm just going to type in C6. And you can see that it highlights that in yellow now, recognizing that that's the cell that I'm doing the calculation on. Now I typed that one in. Let me show you another shortcut. If I were to delete the 95,000, instead of typing the cell reference, I can actually just click on the cell, and Google Sheets and Excel as well will recognize that cell as the one that I'm trying to reference, and it will type it in for me, saving me a little bit of time. So now that I've replaced the numbers with cell references, if I press enter, it's going to adjust the change down to that 1,500. That's the correct number for the change between my salaries this year and last year. And if I were to go back in and change my 93,000 back to 92,000, you'll see that the change will now update automatically. And that's the idea of using cell referencing in Excel instead of just typing in hard-coded numbers. So throughout the assignment today, anytime you have a gray formula cell or a green function cell, which we'll talk about in a minute, I need those to have cell references. Do not type hard-coded numbers in them. If you do, you will get the assignment wrong. All right, so now we have our formula created in our sheet. What we need to do now is create that same formula for every single category in our budget. Now, if there were a long list of categories, that could take a really long time. So we want to try and find a faster way to do that. There is a tool inside of Google Sheets and Excel called a drag fill that can help with that. Basically what a drag fill does is it copies a formula and then pastes it across all of the highlighted cells around it. So let me show you how this works. To copy a cell using a drag fill, you have to select the cell first, and then it will be highlighted in blue if you're in Google Sheets or green if you're in Excel. Then if you'll notice, the active cell now has a little square in the lower right corner right here. That square is your drag fill. As you move your mouse up over the drag fill, your cursor changes to a large black plus, and it does the same thing in Excel as well. Once you see that cursor change and you're over the little square in the lower right corner, click and hold and then drag down. And as you drag down, it highlights all of the cells below it. So we're going to highlight all of the gray cells in this column. Once you've highlighted them, release your mouse and it will paste the formula across each of those cells. Now, you may notice that it doesn't copy and paste the exact same formula. We don't get the exact same answer. What it's doing is it's pasting that same general formula idea across all of the different rows using what's called relative cell referencing, which we'll talk about a little later on. But it's a super helpful way to hurry and copy and paste a formula across multiple cells at once. So now we have all of our formulas there. I'd like to look at another handy tool that we can use for doing formulas called a function. So where a formula is a mathematical expression that calculates a value in a cell, a function is kind of a pre-built code for a formula that simplifies different commands that we do on a more frequent basis. So let me show you an example of that. Let's say that the manager would like us to total last year's, this year's, and the change in the budgets. So we're going to go down to row 14. I'm going to start on column B, and we want to total all of the budget categories for last year. Now, if I wanted to, I could create a formula for this, just like we did with the change. So again, if I were creating a formula, I have to ask Excel politely. So I'm going to say equals, and then I would type in my cells. So let's say cell B6 plus B7 plus B8. And I would go down the list one by one, and that would take a tremendous amount of time. So instead, we can use one of those functions. And you could actually see as I started typing, Excel was already, or Google Sheets was already recommending some functions for me. So there are 5 basic functions that we're going to be using in this business math assignment. Those 5 basic functions are sum, average, count, max, and min. How a basic function works is you start by listing the name of the function after the equal sign. Then in parentheses, you give it a range of cells or a group of cells that you want to calculate using that function. So for example, if we were going to total something like we are today, then we would want to use the sum function. So I'm going to create a sum function here in Excel. I'm going to press the equal sign, and I'm going to type in sum, S-U-M, and open a parenthesis. Then I'm going to select a range of cells in which I can sum or calculate the total of that range. Now I could simply type in the range by selecting the first cell in the range, a colon, and the last cell in the range. But Google Sheets and Excel allow us to click and drag to select ranges of cells. So I'm just going to come to the very top of my range, click and hold, and drag down, and you'll see that all of those cells highlight together in the same color, and it types the range for me. Then once I've selected my range, I can close parenthesis and hit enter, and that calculates my sum for me. Now there is a faster way that we could do this as well, using what's called an auto sum. So those 5 basic functions are so common that Excel and Google Sheets have created a fast button to generate that function for you. So let's try doing that in column C. I'm going to go to column C to C14. And then in Google Sheets, the auto sum is this sideways M button here on the very right side of the main menu there. They call it functions. In Excel, the auto sum is also on the Home tab on the very far right in a very similar place. It's just a little smaller, and it's called an auto sum, and it has the exact same sideways M symbol. So that should make it easy to find. So we're going to come up to auto sum or functions, and you can see that the 5 basic functions right here. We're going to select the sum function, and when I do that, in Google Sheets, it generates the sum and then asks me to select the range that I want to work in. So I'm going to select the range and press enter. So it saves me the time of having to calculate or type in the function, and all I have to do is select the range. So that makes it kind of handy. So whichever way you want to do it, if you want to type it in or if you want to use the AutoSum or functions tool, it doesn't matter to me. But anytime you have a green cell like this, I would like you to use a function to do the calculation, and that's what I'll be looking for in order for you to get it right. Now, just like with our gray cells, I can autofill or drag fill this formula across my other cells. So drag fills can be done up and down. They can also be done side to side. So I'm going to come to the little box in the right corner, click and hold that, and then drag to the right, and I can drag fill my totals across to the change column. Perfect. So this spreadsheet took us a little longer today because I was walking you through it step by step. But if you were to do this on your own, now that you understand how to use a drag fill, basic formulas, and the auto functioning tools, this would have only taken you a matter of minutes. And that's the value of doing calculations in Microsoft Excel or Google Sheets. Now, creating a spreadsheet like this is only valuable if we can do something with the numbers and learn something from them. So in each spreadsheet, I'm going to have some blue cells where I would like you to answer some questions about what you've learned from the data now that you've had a chance to calculate it. So let's look at the examples for this spreadsheet. The first question says, which budget item had the greatest change? So let's take a look at our change column here and see which of these different budget categories had the greatest change. It looks like salaries had the greatest change with $2,500 worth of difference. So I'm going to come here in the blue cell and I'm going to type in salaries. Now it wants to know, was this a positive or a negative change? In this case, we learned that the parentheses around the number make it negative, so salaries is a negative change. Now, which budget item was the smallest? That one was subscriptions. And as I'm horrendously misspelling all of this, it's good to note, if you can spell these correctly, it will certainly help me in the grading process. So try and get them spelled correctly. If you misspell something, I'll catch it usually and fix it for you. But it does help my grading process because I do automate the grading if these are spelled correctly. I say that as I misspell them myself. Okay, so these blue cells are going to be where you type in answers to the questions. Those are the only cells where you can hard code answers in. Just type them straight in without using a formula or function. Anything in gray cells are going to be formulas, mathematical calculations. Anything in green cells are going to be functions, sum, average, count, max, or min. And anything in blue are going to be simply answers to the questions themselves. So what I want you to do now that we've done the budget one together is to walk through commissions, baseball, and payroll on your own. And remember, each sheet is down here at the bottom in their own individual sheet tab. So click on each sheet and go through each one individually on your own, fill in the gray, green, and blue cells, and then you'll be finished with today's assignment.